See what's going on. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. You guys know me. I get nervous. I got to make sure that everything's good and that the internet has given us another day and that we're official. And it looks like we are. It looks like we're official, which is beautiful. I have to wait until I physically see it, and I have. That is beautiful. What's up, everybody? Good afternoon. Good evening. Good morning. Doing my time zone third. I like doing it that way. I like doing my time zone third. I hope you are doing well. I hope you are staying safe. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. I hope you had a happy holiday weekend. I hope all your dreams have come true. Really, if you got dreams, I hope you crushed all of them. Special thanks to the people who make this show possible. First, our friends over at ZT.com. Their tea kind of rules. And pick some up. You can get it wholesale now for the pandemic. They provide the tea to this show. I highly recommend the white peach tea. It's a Chinese tea. It's phenomenal. And the raspberry pecan, one of my personal favorites as well. But their teas are great. Go to ZT.com, ZHITEA.com. Pick up some tea. They supply the tea to this show. And there's no reason to ever get your tea anywhere else. Our friends over at triageoil.com, TRIAGE oil.com. They make pain oil that you put on your body, and it works wonders. You guys know I've been using it on my neck, which has never been the same since a car accident I had in 2013. And this oil has done more for it than anything else has. That's not an exaggeration. So please, if you need some pain oil for your joints or if you got some sunburns, 'tis the season. This stuff works wonders. Triageoil.com. Pick some up. And finally, rarenaturalscbd.com. If you're looking for some CBD oil you can ingest, you can put it under your tongue. You can put it in your drink. It's great after an intense workout to relax yourself. It's great if you're just feeling stressed out and you want to mellow out a little bit. For some folks, it helps you sleep. For me, I like it best if I kind of feel a headache coming on. It really helps a lot with that. Or if I just feel really tense, like, I'm tense. The world around me is going to shit. This helps out. So rarenaturalscbd.com. That's with an S, rarenaturalscbd.com. Best part is use the promo code Lucy at checkout and get 30% off your order. Boom. Promo code Lucy, Lucy at checkout. Get 30% off your order. Again, that's rarenaturalscbd.com. All right, without further ado. So, guys, as you know, over the weekend, we had the hottest day ever, literally ever, on record in Los Angeles, where I live. It was a balming $120 out, baby. And something's going on. Well, we're lucky because today we're going to break it down. I had the privilege of meeting this gentleman at the People's Convention the other week. We both presented at the People's Convention. He is a climate scientist and author, and he works for the NASA Jet Propulsion Lab. However, he is speaking on his own behalf today. Please welcome to the show, Peter Kalmus. Peter, how are you?
Hey, Ron. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here. So here's the headline here, just so folks know, this is literal. Los Angeles hits 121 degrees, or $120, as I put it. I underestimated it slightly. The county's hottest day ever on record because something's happening with the climate. Peter, you are a climate scientist, and the first question I really want to ask anybody in your profession is just, please tell me we're going to be okay.
No
pressure.
It's up to us. I mean, I have to say I'm terrified. I'm freaking out. It's just crazy, the heat that we've experienced. So I'm in Los Angeles too. It was 116 at my house. There's a fire now, the Bobcat fire in the San Gabriel Mountains, burning a few miles away from my house. I've seen dead plants. I was walking my dog yesterday. There was a dead bird under a tree. I think it might have just died from the heat and fallen from the tree. It is freaking crazy, and it's getting worse because it's just tied to mainly to our fossil fuel emissions. So carbon dioxide emissions from burning fossil fuels, and we're not stopping. That's the thing that freaks me out. Like we see all this stuff getting worse, and we're just continuing to burn like there's no tomorrow. It's going to get worse until we stop that, which is why we need a Green New Deal.
So let's start at the basics. When you say climate change, when we address climate change, what are some of the big bullet points as far as what's at stake? Like what will really happen if we do nothing or just continue on the path we're on?
Yeah. So people sometimes talk about being in a new normal now, which I hate that term so much, because that's not what's happening. We're sort of on an escalator, uh, going up to hotter temperatures, worse storms, worse wildfires, more crop failures, more climate migrants, geopolitical destabilization. Our food systems and water systems are going to start to get hammered more and more. Um, it's a trend, so it's something that's getting worse every day, because every day we're emitting more carbon dioxide, and until we stop that, it's going to keep getting worse. So that's the main thing, uh, is to just understand that this is getting worse, and that fossil fuels are the main driver, and that we need to stop that, which means a radical restructuring of so many of our systems, our energy system, of course, but also our agricultural systems, which use fossil fuel, but also emit other greenhouse gases too, such as methane and nitrous oxide, which aren't quite as important as carbon dioxide, but they're still also really important. Changing our transportation systems, our our social structures, how we how we transfer resources between the rich and the poor, and between rich nations and poor nations. I'm concerned that later this century, a certain amount of warming or global heating is already locked in from emissions from the past too. Let me take a step back and just say, this weekend I was actually backpacking in Los Padres National Forest, and the humid heat was so bad that I got heat exhaustion for the first time in my life. Now I know what that feels like. It's like this panicky feeling of not being able to breathe, and you feel nauseous, and you feel disconnected from the air, and just kind of like you don't know how you're going to get reconnected to feeling normal and being able to breathe again. And I think that there's projections for the tropics, for humid heat, so an increase in the heat index in the wet bulb temperature later this century, which could make it fairly, almost every day by the end of the century in some portions of the tropics, where hundreds of millions or maybe even billions of people live, could become all but uninhabitable. You won't be able to be outside. Your body won't be able to get rid of the heat and actually survive in that humid heat for multiple days per year, possibly even every day per year by the end of the century. And those people are going to have to go somewhere. So there's all those human factors, and then there's also ecosystems. The coral reefs are dying all over the world because ocean heat waves are getting too bad for them. The wildfires, we see the wildfires and we breathe the smoke from them, and we hate them. But what's also happening there is you're getting a transformation of an ecosystem, for example, from a forest ecosystem to a grassland, savanna, or scrub ecosystem. We could potentially lose the Amazon rainforest sometime in the near future.
When you say near future, what does that mean?
It's very hard to estimate when these kinds of tipping points might be passed. But my sense is sometime within the next few decades. I will say that a lot of the stuff that's happening now, ice loss in the Arctic, ice loss from the Greenland ice sheet, have been happening faster than I expected. It's hard as a climate scientist to kind of stay current on all of the stuff that's changing, because it's so much and it's happening so fast, and there's so much new science coming out. But my sense is, the Amazon, it wouldn't surprise me if we kind of really lose it by mid-century.
So, what you kind of touched on there towards the end of your answer was something I wanted to talk to you about. I think that, it's amazing the amount of denial you still see, especially in the contemporary United States. And I think a lot of it, and I want your thoughts on this because you can speak to this a lot better than I can. I am not a scientist at all, but I understand the basics of how science works. I understand how it's evolving and how it's trial and error and how you're projecting things based on, what is happening around you, based on, trends that you've noticed. So it's impossible to exactly predict by this year, this is going to happen. But we've safely projected that, well, this is happening. Human beings are part of the reason this is happening, a big part of it. And the cost of doing nothing is drastic. We can't do nothing. Do you think a lot of the people who are denying climate change, they just don't understand how that process works?
That's a great question. I've been a climate scientist since 2012, and I've been a climate activist since 2006 was when I really kind of started seeing this as an emergency. And, ever since 2006, I've kind of wondered what the answer to that question is myself. And I'm still not really sure. You can't talk to a climate denier and, you can't show them plots and you can't talk about the science and you can't convince them that way. My dad was actually a climate scientist back in 2006. And over about the course of 10 years, I wore him down. And now he's one of the very rare Republican climate activists, possibly about the only one that I know.
So wait, your dad was a climate denier?
Yeah, he was.
Okay.
He was trained as a chemist too. So, he was actually trained as a scientist, but he was still denying the reality of climate change, and then how serious it was. And it took I don't know how many hours of phone calls. If we're talking hundreds of hours of phone calls, and I'm not sure what finally did it, but he's no longer a climate denier, and he'll deny that he ever was a climate denier. But yeah, I don't know. I still don't understand how anyone can deny this. I think there's denial on I would say on both sides of the political spectrum. You have Republicans saying it's an out and out hoax. You have a president saying that. And then you have, liberals and Democrats who, in my opinion, just don't understand how serious it is. And they'll say the science is true. We know this is an emergency, but then I don't see them making any changes. And that's, either on the policy side or just in their own lives. And in my opinion, once you really understand something is an emergency and your hair stands up straight on its ends, like mine.
I'm here. I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'm doing it, buddy. I'm doing it for you.
Once that happens, you have to make changes, right? If your house is burning, you don't just sit there and continue watching Netflix. You get the fuck out and call 911.
You don't throw a Dixie cup of water at it and be like, it didn't do anything.
Exactly.
I thought that was good.
So there's a spectrum of denial, and I think now I'm really hoping that the public. I see the public waking up tremendously, especially over the last couple of years. I mean, now this is one of the main issues among voters. If you look at the overall electorate, I think pretty soon it will likely be the top issue among voters in the United States. So there's this huge. But still, at the same time, you look on Twitter and what's trending at any given time, right? It's always some sports thing. It's never climate. You can have the hottest day ever recorded on planet Earth in Death Valley, which was 129.9 degrees Fahrenheit a couple of weeks ago, and you'll still see some sports thing trending. So we have a ways to go, but people are still waking up, and I hope very soon this becomes such a key issue for the voting public that no politicians will be able to survive in office any longer if they don't kind of put this at the top of their campaigns and have actions that, policy proposals, and then actually follow through on them in ways that you can see, the emissions going down, right? That's the key thing. You can say whatever you want, make all kinds of promises and have the best plan in the world. And you can even enact some policies, but if it doesn't cause the US curve to go down drastically, and then eventually cause the global emissions curve to start going down, it doesn't mean anything as far as the Earth system is concerned.
Well, So you brought up the political, policy aspect of this, which of course I wanted to talk to you about. I mean, you were an attendee and presenter at the People's Convention, so clearly you see what's going on in our electoral politics as problematic across the board. Do you think that, like, well, let me frame it this way: is there hope in the idea, because I feel like no matter what happens in November, you're not going to have an ally to the climate in office. You're going to have incrementalism or nothing at all. But is there still hope in, if everyone mobilized and had a real Green New Deal in their city? Is there strength in that? Do you see like hope on the local level or even the state level, maybe?
Absolutely, and I think that's what's been happening over the last few years. Is so I think the change is absolutely going to come from the grassroots. I wish we had strong top-down change at the federal level. We didn't even get that under Obama. And there's multiple reasons for that, but one of the main reasons.
Well, he said all of the above, but he didn't tell us that just meant drill, baby, drill.
Yeah, I mean, he seemed to make some signals that he was worried about climate, but then at the end of his second term, he really pivoted and started really literally bragging about how much oil and natural gas the United States was producing, which that kind of made my head explode. So, I mean, the one of the main problems, of course, coming back to why I would take the fairly drastic step for a scientist to actually give a speech at any political convention, let alone a kind of a, sort of currently fringe third-party convention called the People's Convention. So why would a scientist do that? Well, I'm freaking out. I've been freaking out for a decade and a half. I don't see policies coming. And I see two parties in our country that are both basically bought by the fossil fuel industry, among other corporate interests. And the problem here is that we don't need to reduce our fossil fuel use. This is what makes this so hard. We need to take it down to zero, because that carbon dioxide from burning that fossil gas and burning that coal and burning that oil, it basically more or less stays in the atmosphere for forever in terms of our lifetimes. Like for as far as we're concerned as human animals walking around on this planet, that stuff stays up there forever. So it starts coming down after a few hundred years, and some of it lingers up there for a few thousand years, and then the last little bit can linger up there for tens of thousands of years. But the time scale of CO2 is pretty long. So it accumulates. And we have to take this down to zero as quickly as we can.
And so, well, let me interject here real quick. What is your timeline on that? Because, I mean, you see, the Green New Deal, like parts of the Green New Deal called for 2025, others called for 2030. And then, like Joe Biden is calling for 2050, which I think scientific consensus says that is too late. Well,
so science doesn't really say what the deadline is for coming off of our fossil fuel addiction. What I think it says is the impacts and the costs and the suffering and the death and the kind of irreversible changes to our Earth system, which are going to plague our descendants for possibly thousands of generations. That stuff is all going to get worse and worse every single day we emit more fossil fuels. That's what the science says. Okay. So what that suggests to me is that we have to get off as fast as possible. Now, as someone who, and the bigger an emergency you see this is, probably, the sooner you would want to set those goals. And if you don't really see this as a big emergency, or if you if you're like 80 years old and you're like, I'm out of here in a few years anyway, I don't really care, then 2050 sounds fine, because that's basically saying, screw the kids, screw the young people. This is their problem. Let them figure it out, right? That's what 2050 says. When I see 2050, I think that's a policymaker that knows he or she's going to be out of office, and they're not going to have to worry about this, and they're just going to offload this problem on the people coming after them. That's what 2050 feels like to me. So Biden's plan says 2035 for getting a carbon-free electricity. I think we can go faster than that. I mean, good Lord, if we really saw this as our lives being at stake, which is the way I see it currently, especially with the fire burning so close to my house and these crazy temperatures. When you live through heat waves and fires like that, it really changes you, I think. At least it changes me. And I was already freaked out. So if you see this as a genuinely life-threatening thing, if we had 300 million people in the United States who saw this as a genuinely life-threatening thing, or maybe at least like their friends and loved ones and neighbors, and so they were once removed from that, I think we could get carbon-free electricity in 5 years, maybe even sooner. If we right now, there's so many people that still like prioritize, cheap electricity, or they prioritize getting on a plane and flying to Tahiti or flying off to some conference. They prioritize that stuff over really taking action on climate. So if climate bubbles up to the very top thing and people are like, oh crap, this is a life or death thing, who knows how fast we could change our energy systems. And electricity is the easy part, of course. That's why the rest, electricity is about 1/3. Generating electricity accounts for about 1/3 of our overall carbon dioxide emissions and energy use. And then the other 2/3 is all the other stuff, the transportation and whatnot. And so that's why the rest of it is 2050, because the electricity is actually the easy part. So, but to go back to a point I was making just really quick earlier, to bring that down, fossil fuel use down as quickly as we can, it means killing the fossil fuel industry. And they're going to go, I think they're already going into survival mode. And they've been fighting hard for decades to kill climate policy, to control the politics, to control the discourse, and to literally lie to the public, right? They've been saying that the science is, they've been casting doubt and misinformation and confusion into the discourse about the science and making it far harder for us not only to just do our jobs, but to rate, since the 70s. And they've known. I mean, it's so well documented that these oil majors, the Shells and the Exxons, they had their own internal research, which was right on the money. And they some big boardroom with their cigars, right? Some like little scientist that works for them comes up and says like, this is really bad. Our products are going to kill the planet. And these CEOs and whatnot, and publicists and lobbyists reading this and smoking their cigars and saying, we're gonna suppress this, and even more than this, we're gonna lie and tell the public everything's fine so we can keep selling our stuff. We're literally just taking it from the earth and then selling it and making these massive profits, right? So that then we can spend a teeny tiny portion of those profits and fund politicians and control the political discourse, right? They're going to keep doing that. They're going to greenwash. They're going to say that they want green energy. They're going to say things. I talked to a couple of executives from Shell, and what they told me, they gave me some glossy pamphlets which tried to make it look like Shell cared, which they don't. And they said, we'll go as fast as our customers let us.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah. Oh, they literally said that to me.
Some marketing executive came up with that. Pass the buck. That's
exactly.
Like our marketing strategy, pass the buck. Oh, our customers just love these cars because they have to get places.
Right. And meanwhile, our planet's literally melting and burning all around us. So it's just, that's what drove me to the fairly audacious, unusual step of speaking at the People's Convention, which it was an honor to do, but it is unusual for a scientist to do that. And it's potentially damaging to my career, but I don't care anymore.
All right. Well, this doesn't leave us. All right.
The planet, my kids, the coral reefs, they're all more important than my career. So, I don't want to lose my career, because then, I think I'll be in a world of pain and I'll be taken less seriously. And I love doing science. I've always loved doing science, but I cannot sit on the sidelines. I literally can't. I would undergo mental anguish, and I couldn't be a whole person if I knew this and I wasn't and this is why I'm on your show, right? And if I knew what I'm seeing and I wasn't speaking out as clearly and strongly as I possibly could, I think I would have serious, I don't know what they would call it, cognitive dissonance and probably depression and massive anxiety. So I couldn't even do my day job, if I wasn't speaking out, because it would just feel too weird to me to be writing Python code and doing analyses and just kind of knowing what's coming and not doing anything else. I couldn't do that.
So do you think maybe, to kind of take this an optimistic route, do you think maybe in some ways you're just ahead of the curve? I mean, I know that a lot of the science community feels the same way you do. And friends of mine who are scientists, a lot of them echo similar things. They echo such frustration about the powers that be. They echo such frustration about, what these fossil fuel companies are doing and how no one's doing anything about this. They echo concerns for their children. Is it only a matter of time before, putting on the activist hat is not only encouraged, it's mandatory?
Yeah, that's it, Ron. So, before the lockdown happened, I maybe have beers with some friends, and after a few beers, you get climate scientists talking, and I want them to talk like that, to the public openly. The thing is, climate scientists, it's a tricky thing. We did not sign up to be activists. I don't want to be an activist. I don't want to be in politics at all. I don't even want to be, visible in the media. I just want to do science, have some fruit trees, raise my family, have a little bit of fun while I'm here. I didn't sign up for this. I don't want to be doing this. I don't think most scientists want to be doing this activist stuff. But the fact of the matter is we're in the hot seat. We're in this situation now where we're the experts on these dramatic, dangerous changes to the Earth system. And if we kind of pretend or give these vibes that if we seem calm, if we kind of give the science and talk about the plots and we don't give any context for what this means to us emotionally, how this makes us feel as parents, how this makes us feel as humans, how this makes us feel as citizens, if we just kind of dryly kind of present the science, and expect the public to, what I'm kind of saying is I need the public to start freaking out, because if they don't, I don't think we're going to get the policies, and I don't think we're going to get the systems changed. And there's this sort of bystander effect where they, your average member of the public, they've got a million things to do. They've got a million things to worry about. Maybe they don't have health care. Maybe they just lost their job, especially in this lockdown. Maybe they're worried about getting evicted. Maybe their kids are going to jail. There's a million things that the average person is worrying about. If the climate scientists seem calm and we're not freaking out, that maybe they'll watch us. Maybe they'll see a clip on the news and there's some climate scientists talking about, carbon emissions and carbon budgets and whatnot, and then smiling at the end of the interview and saying, thank you very much. And it seems like they're not too worried, right? What's that member of the public going to think? They're going to think, I've got 100 other things to worry about, so I guess I don't have to worry about this yet. It's not that bad. And I wish that wasn't the case, but frankly, the scientists do play a role in bringing that awareness to the public. And I don't know how else to say that. I think I see more of my colleagues starting to speak out. I wish more, especially the ones who are senior and who have good job security and who have maybe tenure. I wish they would just start swearing and, freaking out and saying how it makes them feel, to be seeing this stuff. Maybe they're sad, maybe they're angry, maybe they're depressed, maybe some of them feel despair. Maybe some of them feel cautious optimism, but that, we need urgent action. There's this emotional space just for you and for non-scientists. I think it's very complicated for us scientists too. And I think that's that kind of talk and that kind of emotional communication. So there's factual communication, which is the papers, which is the summary reports from the IPCC. It's the plots and the facts. And that's factual information. And there's also emotional information. And I think you know, scientists have to, in this uncomfortable position maybe of kind of our role, if we want to help turn this planet, turn our society, our emitting society around, I think we might have to start taking on both roles.
Do you have cautious optimism? And if so, how and where?
Well, it's a race. It's a race between everything melting and burning. And, you know, if things get worse every single day, eventually you get to a point where systems break. And again, they're usually nonlinear. Human systems, infrastructure, economic systems. It's very hard to predict when they break because they don't just kind of, they don't give you feedback like, I'm getting worse, I'm getting worse. If I get this much worse, I'm going to break. They just suddenly break, right? So it's a race against that. Also, the same is true for natural systems. And I think the grassroots movement. So, you know, the thing that gives me hope right now is just that we're talking about a Green New Deal now, right? You know, I'll be great. I'm forever grateful to AOC and Ed Markey and Bernie and others.
Well, and the Green Party.
I guess.
I mean, the Green Party really kind of forced that conversation, you know, at the beginning.
For sure. I mean, I think there were decades of groundwork and then there were a lot of things that came together, which made it suddenly start to take off a couple of years ago, including scientists starting to in my opinion, to start to tell climate truth a little bit more straightforwardly. Even in the IPCC report that came out in October of 2018, I think that was a pretty landmark report because it started to say, you know, even 1.5, we're at 1.1 degrees Celsius of average global heating now. It basically said 1.5 degrees is going to suck hard, and 2 degrees Celsius is going to look like, you know, some kind of hellscape, right? I wish that you would just use language like that, but it didn't quite use language like that. But it was close enough to kind of really break through this objective, this kind of false objectivity, this you know, projection of scientific calm, right? It broke through that, and that helped a lot. But yeah, so that's what gives me hope, is that the grassroots movement is getting big. I think we need 1 billion climate activists. I think that the COVID lockdown really took the wind out of the sails of the climate movement, but I think it started to find its footing again in this kind of post-COVID world. And, you know, I hope that whatever happens on November 3rd, you know, I'll come right out and say it, that I do hope Biden wins. I definitely hate vote shaming. I don't understand why people think vote shaming is a good strategy. But, you know, whatever happens on November 3rd, I want to see the grassroots climate movement just get stronger and stronger and stronger.
Well, and again, whatever happens November 3rd, it will still be mandatory.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you have look at the DNC. I mean, this was another thing that made my head explode just a couple of weeks ago. They literally said, we're not going to end fossil fuel subsidies.
Oh, yeah. Biden was just bragging about it. He's like, we're not going to end fracking. Don't worry. We're not.
And then Biden saying, we're not going to end fracking. Yeah, don't worry, guys. We won't end fracking. I mean, it's like these old school politicians. I don't know what it is, if it's just their perspective as kind of elders, and they've lived their whole lives with, you know, all of the car imagery with Joe Biden. Just, I'm like, do we really want to be, you know, glorifying car culture in a climate emergency? You know, it's just like, I think they've lived their whole lives with kind of fossil fuel being normalized and not having to worry about climate breakdown, that it's really hard for them as elders to shift. I know a lot of amazing activists who are that same age, so it's not true for everyone, but
of course,
somehow these politicians, a lot of them, Nancy Pelosi, you know, is another example. They just don't seem to see this with the same urgency that I see it, or that AOC sees it, or that members of the Sunrise Movement see that, or my own kids see it. I mean, it's completely different if you're a 13-year-old right now and you're seeing everything burning down, and you're seeing the planet getting hotter and hotter. You're seeing all these ecosystems die. Burning fossil fuel doesn't seem the same to you as it did to maybe somebody who was growing up in the 50s when they weren't worried about any of this. And it just, so it could be that, it could be ties to the fossil fuel industry. I mean, I think there's fracking lobbyists in Joe Biden's campaign still. Obviously his family's had a lot of ties to the fossil gas industry. I still don't really understand why Tom Perez, he almost seems like he doesn't want climate action. He put the kibosh on a climate
Well, because his
debate.
donors don't.
I guess that must be it. I mean, and that's why I support the People's Party. I wish the People's Party success. I think we desperately need corporate influence out of our politics. I think even if the People's Party doesn't succeed, for example, in winning seats, I hope at least the challenge forces the Democrats to actually move to the left. So I don't know. I don't have a lot of, frankly, with, I'll just come out. I don't have a ton of respect for political pundits usually. I'm certainly not one. I don't
consider myself one. So
okay, good. So
I don't. None taken at all. I mean, I'm a comedian.
A lot of blue checks right there. So
yeah, and which I'm actually not one of them either. I mean, no, I'm a comedian who talks about stuff that I care about and that's interesting to me. And the difference between, I think what qualifies someone an actual political pundit is they have to pretend like the wrestling match is real and behave like a wrestling announcer. I don't need to pretend the wrestling match is real, nor would I ever do that.
Well, anyway, it's really hard to predict what's going to happen. But the thing that's glaringly obvious to me is that we just need corporate influence out of our politics, and it's hard to see how to get there with the tendrils in so deep, right? Once they've changed enough laws, once they've done Citizens United, once they have ALEC and they start writing their own legislation, and they change the tax system, and they gain legal personhood, and they're able to create media outlets that can lie with impunity, and it becomes very, very hard to see how to come back from where we are now. I think one thing I hope we've learned is that we can't just be, those of us with privilege, maybe the white middle class, can't just sit on the sidelines for decades while these changes kind of gradually happen and allow our democracy to get to the point that it is right now. I hope we've learned that lesson.
Well, so getting back to the kind of action portion of everything, do you, I mean, one of the things when I see our political structure in the United States, which I personally think it is just so far to the right, it's unbelievable, and it doesn't reflect the people that live here. But, I kind of have been looking more around the world because I don't have any confidence we're going to get a top bottom thing. I think it has to be bottom up. I think that's the only option. But I mean, is it acceptable that other parts of the world will lead from a policy standpoint and the United States will have to follow?
I mean, I'm not totally sure what you mean by acceptable, but it's hard for the US is just such an economic and cultural and technological powerhouse, even still, that it's just hard to if the United States doesn't start to lead on climate, it's just going to be this huge dead weight on the global kind of the global thrust to lead. And the other nations are going to keep saying, well, why should we do anything if the US isn't doing anything? So I don't know. My opinion is that it's imperative for the US to start to lead.
Okay.
Not to mention all of the benefits that we'll get if we do, right? Like all the jobs,
of course,
and the economic benefits and the sense of being just, I think it would be great to feel like our country was kind of back in the game again and that we could be proud of it. Like I really miss feeling proud of my country. Don't you?
I don't really remember a point where I was proud of it, but I miss
I want to feel proud of it. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, I mean,
it'd be a great feeling.
I don't think I mean, the only things that I'm proud of are things that I've always been proud of. I mean, I'm proud of a lot of the cultural things the United States, has done. Like a lot of my favorite music in the whole wide world was made here. And then the Violent Femmes really immortalized that sentiment in their song "American Music." There's a lot of literature that I love that was made here. There's a lot of inspiring authors and activists and academics and radicals and free thinkers. And, that'll never change. That can't be taken away. But as far as what our power structure has done, I don't see very much to be proud of. There were little things here and there. There were some concessions here and there that, again, the only reason that happened was because of those movements we've been talking about. And I've been proud of that. But as far as an overall, USA, I couldn't tell you. I mean,
and this is a historic moment because of the climate and ecological emergency that we're in. The decisions we make in the next few years are going to have implications that have ripples on this planet, not just for the next few decades, but for thousands of years. That's remarkable to me, that decisions over the next few years can literally set the tone of human life on this planet for generations and generations to come. So clearly, if you look at the projections and if you start to understand what it means to be on that escalator and how things are just going to keep getting worse until we have to, abandon coastal cities, and we have to abandon, huge swaths near the equator, Indonesia, India, parts of Africa, parts of South America and Central America, maybe Northern Australia, just this huge band. Do
you think that will for sure happen in our lifetimes?
It's very hard for me to say, and it still very, very much depends on what humans decide to do.
Okay.
So again, if we mitigate and we come off of fossil fuels and we destroy the fossil fuel industry, like our lives depend on it, we can save so much damage. If we sit on our hands and just procrastinate for another decade, we're going to be well and truly fucked, my friend. And the historical moment that we're in, based on that physics, the physics of infrared photons is going up from the surface of our planet and hitting these little non-linear molecules like CO2 that start to vibrate and then re-emit that radiation back down. So that's how they act like a heat blanket. It's just basic quantum physics. It's going to keep getting worse. That's just the way I can. It's so easy to tweet about this. It's kind of sad, but you just make that prediction that things are going to get worse with 100% confidence. So to be adopting Green New Deal and to be kind of focusing our nation's future around this transition and around a just transition, because to get that grassroots movement strong enough, and to actually make this politically feasible, we need a just transition. It's the right thing to do, but it's also just the practical thing to do. It's the thing that'll work. But that's historic, and I want our nation to be on the right side of history. I want all the universities to divest and get on the right side of history. I want climate activists to stop flying in planes, because they will eventually, once they realize just how big of an emergency this is. One of the first things we should probably stop doing is stop with all the flying, just because we don't really need it. Like we know that with this lockdown, humans lived fine and did their thing fine before we had planes. It's just to me, it's just such a frivolous thing, and it's so symbolic of our lack of will, both at the individual and at the collective level, to really to make changes, right? So, but anyway, we all need,
well, what about
every level, individual, city, state, federal, international. I want to see everyone get on the right side of history, because that side, what the right side is just so clear now.
Well, what about touring performers like me? What should we? I mean, because the idea of no air travel, that's pretty significant. But I mean, is less the key, or should we start getting better with boats?
We should definitely start getting better with boats. We should change how we how we value travel. It should be seen as very precious. If you want to go to Europe, if you get on a boat, you're going to stay there for a few months instead of just a weekend. And that's okay. And I want to see remote technology get into the 21st century. I think this is still what we're doing right now. video calling. It's still 20th century technology, basically. How much better can we make this? Can we make it faster? Can we have virtual reality? Can we make it so that it's closer to being there in person? I don't know, but the bottom line is, however good we can make alternatives to flying, the reason I think it's so symbolic is because we have to start to realize that this is a big enough emergency, and the damage that we're doing now is irreversible. It's permanent. It's going to be very hard to, or possibly, I think it might be impossible to suck the carbon we've emitted out of the atmosphere and to revive the coral reefs that are dying. I mean, how are we going to do that? There's a quote from I can't remember who said this, but you can't take an iceberg that breaks off and you take a rope and bring it back to the ice sheet. This stuff's irreversible. And when we fly today, and I know this is a contentious thing to say, I think that people who are with me on kind of life or death emergency, most of them agree. The people who think that it's pretty urgent, it's one issue among many, they probably disagree. But I think that it's enough of an emergency that we have to start kind of priority, that we shouldn't be flying anymore, basically. I don't know how else to say it. To me, it just feels like if I got on a plane now, I'd feel like I was somehow stealing from my children and from other people's children and from other creatures on this planet that are innocent in a really repugnant way. So I can't do it personally. And obviously I know this isn't going to fix the problem. I never said that not flying was a solution. It just irks me to see people who should know better still flying, because it's one of those things. Like if you really know better and this is an emergency and you're still flying around, the message you're sending to the public is that maybe it's not such a big deal. Maybe we can continue business as usual. And we haven't passed that threshold where we have to change everything because it's so serious, right? And that's what I want to see. I want to see us reach this place where we all kind of collectively realize, oh yeah, the fossil fuel industry, revoke that social license. It's not okay anymore for them to just keep producing this stuff that we then burn and put into the atmosphere. That's not okay anymore. You revoke that social license and reach this social tipping point where we say, yes, we need radical change at every level. We need policies. We're willing to spend a little bit more for electricity because the alternative is going to be even more expensive. So I want us to get to that point.
So if you were asked to do a conference in London, you would would you get on a plane then, or would you take a boat?
Well, so I was asked to do a conference in London for The Economist. And before the lockdown, I was like, yeah, I'll do it if you let me present remotely. And they actually said yes, which was remarkable, because I've had other invitations where I said, I'll do it if I can present remotely. And they said no. And and now, of course, the whole thing is virtual. So no, I would, if I've got a family, and I probably, it would take a lot to get me to take a boat to Europe, unless they came with me, maybe just because it would be such a long time. But I could see doing it. I'm a sailor. I love the ocean. I get seasick for the first day. I throw up, and then I'm good to go after that. I get my sea legs. And then I love being out there. 70% of our planet is water. And it's kind of an amazing way just to spend time with the planet, to be on the deep ocean. And I wish more people would experience it, because I think they would get more of a sense that this is kind of a precious pale blue dot. We're in our little air conditioned offices with our grocery stores, and everything's so tame that you forget that we're on this planet with these systems that, that block ultraviolet from us and keep everything the right temperature and provide us with clean air and water. And without that stuff, we would die in a few minutes, right? So it's easy to forget that. And when you're out on the ocean, you kind of remember, which I think is a wonderful thing. But I used to say, I spoke at Bernie's Climate Crisis Summit back in November, which was in Iowa. And I took the train to that. It was worth it to me to spend 4 days on a train to go from Los Angeles to Iowa City and then back again. So yeah, I view travel different. I haven't flown since 2012. I do a lot of stuff virtually. It was nice. If the People's Convention had been on the East Coast and they wouldn't, and they if it was in person and they wouldn't allow me to present remotely, I probably would have said no to that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in a weird way, the lockdown has kind of put me on more of a level playing field in terms of being able to participate in things like that.
So, do you think where do you think adaptation falls into all this? Like I know you were mentioning how occasionally certain things get like mainstream attention more so than others, and one of the pieces that and I don't know why this got all the mainstream attention it did. I read it. I thought it was an interesting piece. Was the deep adaptation piece, where the gentleman talked about basically how adapting is like the biggest key while still, altering our behavior completely. Like I think he called for all the same changes, but he also said we also have to adapt because we're not going to quote unquote stop climate change. The only option is adapting, and it's not an impossibility if we act.
Yeah, well, we have to accept that it's here now. It's not a future thing. We ask anyone in Los Angeles who was outside in that 120-degree heat, right?
No kidding.
It is here now. We're at about 1.1 degrees Celsius of warming, somewhere between 1 and 1.2 degrees, depending on sort of where you set that pre-industrial baseline, which is kind of a tricky thing to work out. But it's here. I think we already are adapting. I mean, there's been discussions about how do we do electricity in California, and should we be living in forested areas that are prone to wildfires? And I keep waiting for real estate in Miami to collapse. I don't really see them adapting a lot down there, but I don't know why anyone will buy real estate there at this point. So I think we're going to start seeing people moving away from the coasts. We're going to start seeing different crops being planted. That's adaptation, and then we're going to see kind of more and more adaptation. We need both. We need all of the above. We need mitigation and we need adaptation. And one of the things that frightens me is to get through this with any degree of grace and love and humanity, although now I'm not even sure what that word humanity means anymore. But to get through this with grace, we're going to need to fight for people we don't know. We're going to need to come together. We're going to need empathy. We're going to have to stop with this nonsense of like, I just care about me, right? And I don't care about anyone else, which is, this kind of, I think American individualism has kind of gotten warped into that direction in an unfortunate way. But what concerns me is that we could very well head in the opposite direction as resources become more scarce, as people start to try to move toward the poles because it's just too damn hot and they can't grow food anymore, and their water systems are failing and their bodies are going into heat stroke, right? They're going to start moving toward the poles, which means, the United States will start getting more and more migrants coming up through the southern border. Canada is going to start to see more people starting to come up. Similar thing in Europe, in Asia. And, I think that could very well lead to more people saying, like, getting afraid, saying we don't have enough, we can't share, and we want to put up more walls, we want more military, and it could get real ugly. I don't know how to fight against that, but I think this is just a weird, frightening place for humanity to be at right now, and I desperately hope that we can find our better selves and be courageous, not roll ourselves into little frightened balls that buy up guns and just it just could get so bad. And I'd love to I got 2 kids, and I don't want them to ever get shot at. I don't want them to ever have to shoot at anyone. I want them always to have enough food, and I want that for everyone on this planet, even people in other nations. And I'm seeing authoritarianism rise throughout the world, and I haven't read a lot of studies that necessarily connect that to global heating, but it feels to me, my instinct is that there is a connection there, and there are a lot of studies that show just if when cities have heat waves, violent crime goes up. People go insane when things get too hot. I think there's literally physiological changes to the brain that increase violent tendencies, and I don't know what else to say. This might be the most important moment that our species has ever confronted. It could well be, because we just have to. We've been taking this planet for granted. This culture, this colonial extractivist culture, which has been dominant for the last few hundred years, has been taking natural resources for granted, thinking like we can just take what we want and kill other species and use them for our purposes, and extract labor from people that don't look like us. And to me, it's insanity, and it hurts so much to see this. And it's like, how do we wake up out of this? I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's like a spiritual awakening, really, that has to happen. And it's a pretty heavy lift.
Yeah, indeed. Where can people go to learn more about you?
So I tweet at Climate Human. I have a website, peterkalmus.net. I have a book that came out a few years ago called Being the Change, Live Well and Spark a Climate Revolution. And my publisher, New Society, let me put the whole thing up on my website for free. So if you want to read it, you can look there.
Awesome. peterkalmus.net. Do you want to stick around for some questions from the audience?
Sure, why not?
All right. So, Sparky, thank you very much for the Super Chat contribution. You keep this show on the air. Does the term fossil fuel mean a government free from Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden? Ha ha ha. All right. This question is for you, Peter. I think you can field this better than I can. This is also from Sparky. What does he think about Gen 4 reactors replacing fossil fuels? Gen 4 can't melt down and consume spent fuel rods from antique nuke plants. You're going to have to field that.
So it's funny that you asked that. Early on in what I kind of refer to as my climate awakening, kind of waking up to how urgent this is, I had a thorium phase where I literally went to Oak Ridge National Laboratories and got a whole bunch of plans from the molten salt thorium reactors from the 1960s and read them. I'm like, this is amazing. They were so close. The thing is now, I just don't think it's fast enough to make a huge difference. I don't oppose it, and I think it's foolish to shut down nuclear plants that are still well within their usable lifespan. So I don't think we should shut anything down early. But permitting nuclear plants now, and the way society, it's just hard to get them through now. I think it's much easier to get the same amount of kilowatt or megawatt or gigawatt generation through renewable than it is through nuclear now. So I'm not opposed to it, but I think it's a little bit of a barking up the wrong tree, because we need something like in the next few years, not just in the next few decades.
All right. Nay, thank you very much for the very, very generous Super Chat contribution. Thank you so, so much. Please share this video on all of social media. Sparky, a Ventura McKinney ticket. What do y'all think? Ventura McKinney ticket. What do y'all think? Nay, what's up? Thunderfoot says science proves none of us will be alive to ever see a drop in CO2 levels. Check him out. I hope that's not the case. Is that the case, Peter?
That's likely the case, because unless we do figure out a way to suck the CO2 out of the atmosphere that we've already emitted, it stays up there for decades. So it's like it's going up. Then it'll be this, like, even if we reduce as quickly as we can, it's like this sine wave, and it'll gradually start to come down. But I think the period you know, I suppose it's possible for somebody who's just being born now, they might start to see the CO2 in the atmosphere start to go down.
Mhm.
But I don't expect to see that. I expect to see global emissions go to zero in my lifetime. But just the atmospheric load, the accumulated CO2 in the atmosphere, I would be surprised if I saw that go down in my lifetime, unless we have like a massive scaled up CO2 capture, which the problem with that is it's super expensive, basically. So we've run our entire economy for a couple hundred years on this almost free stuff that we took out of the ground and burned.
Mhm.
And to run that backwards basically means we have to pay for everything in reverse. Like all of those economic benefits, we kind of have to pay that back. It's like we took out this loan from the planet, and we effectively have to pay it back by kind of running those thermodynamic processes in reverse. So you could do it, but you would take infrastructure maybe on the order of 10 times, you know, what we have right now for extracting the fossil fuels. And that's a pretty heavy thing to burden our kids with, because they're going to be dealing, the young people today, you know, 10 years from now, when 15 years, when they get in power, think of the climate supercharged hurricanes they're going to be dealing with, or the heat waves they're going to be dealing with, the wildfires, you know, the migrations, all of this stuff that we're starting to see now, and the economic costs that go with it. You know, the percentage of GDP, and I think one of the things we need to do is get away from GDP and get away from a growth addicted economy, by the way.
Mhm.
But the fraction of their economy that they're going to have to devote just to surviving with all of this crazy stuff that they're going to be experiencing, and then to add this huge additional burden to pay for pulling carbon back from the air, it just seems unlikely to me that that will ever be economically feasible. So yeah, I don't think it's likely that you or I will see atmospheric CO2 fractions reduce in our lifetimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sparky, when Dad was 12 in 1939, his job was loading 16 tons of coal. I could never convince him there was clean coal. He had to scrub every day. Nay, here's another question. Thank you very much for all your Super Chat contributions, y'all. You really think we have time? California just reached the most acres burned in a season ever before the 2 hottest months still to come. The trains left the station. Plant a garden.
Yeah, well, I mean, we just surpassed 2 million acres burned, and it's early September, and we still have 3 months of fire season left, since now fire season goes until December, and we already surpassed 2018, which was the previous record for acres burned. I think, unfortunately, for a lot of these ecosystems, the train probably has left the station. That's what I was thinking this morning. Is a lot of the areas in California that we take for granted as forested areas are going to start changing, and they're not going to be forested areas anymore. The kind of chaparral that you see in Southern California and the San Gabriel Mountains is probably going to start moving north. But as far as human systems go, I mean, this planet is still, despite all of this craziness, it's still an amazing place. I mean, if you compare it to Mars or Venus or any of the exoplanets that we see, this is still the only place we know that has life in the universe, and it still has clean air.
Did you tell Elon Musk this? Does he know?
It's just so weird to me how I think there's a lot of people out there who genuinely think they can escape to Mars, which it's another one of those things that makes my head explode. It's so far from the kind of land of practicality that you just, it's probably its own kind of denial, and you can't reason with this. But yeah, it's still far easier. Look, if we can't deal with climate, with global heating on this planet, where we have every advantage, I mean, how do you possibly think you could terraform another planet? It's just absurd. Yeah, if we come through this and we figure out how to live well on this planet, then talk to me about living on some other planet, because it's a million times harder. The thing is, what we have to understand is, it's important, as frightening as this is, not to descend into doom and despair, because it's not like a switch that you flick. Oh, like, we're great, we're fucked. It's not a switch like that. It's this continuum where things get worse the more we emit. So we have to the more we minimize, the better off we'll be. It's a continuum of suffering. So
let's just try to ease away from the we're fucked level of the thermometer.
Yes,
let's
please.
try to
I would like that.
We're never going to be completely away from the we're fucked level, but if we could just get a little less fucked, we're going to be better off.
Yeah, so no matter how bad it gets, I urge everyone to keep fighting. I think we need 1 billion climate activists. I want to see people in the street. I don't want to see little polite marches. I want to see people yelling outside of politicians' homes and banging down the doors of their offices and holding them to account and taking direct action and getting involved with Extinction Rebellion, and Sunrise Movement. I don't want polite activism anymore. I want 1 billion really angry, really fearless climate activists out there making a difference, no matter how bad it gets.
So we got a few more questions. Some of them I have no clue how to answer. Nays, first of all, thank you very much. $50 for Lucy. If you please keep sharing large groups on Facebook. Thank you. That will get Lucy a lot of cat treats, and I appreciate it very much. Nay, you also say thumbs up for new strings on Ron's guitar. That's a fair criticism. It is time for me to switch the strings out. Thank you very much. I owe ya. Nay, you also recommend interviewing Dr. Guy McPherson. Is that the guy who says we have 5 years left? Is that who that is?
Yeah, so he's the near-term human extinction guy.
Okay, and that's what I thought.
Yeah, this is a weird quibble. So I don't personally believe that. I kind of think humans are sort of like cockroaches, and it's, we might have to abandon the coasts and the equator, which will suck. That's not a cool thing at all. But there's parts of the planet I think that will remain habitable for quite a long time, and I think we will adapt and move to those places. And there might not be 8 billion of us anymore. We might not have a really snazzy global civilization that has some pretends at least to have justice. It could be samurai warriors and warlords again. I don't know, and serfs and fiefdoms. So I don't know what's going to happen, but it's very hard for me to think that all of humanity will go extinct, especially in 5 or 10 or whatever, however many years in the near future. The reason I don't really enjoy having this discussion is because I really think that we should set the bar a little higher than not going extinct.
Sure, that's fair.
But yeah, I don't see any persuasive scientific or other evidence that we will go extinct. But I don't like being the guy arguing that. I don't want anyone to think that means this is okay, because it isn't.
Well, somebody who, as a friend of mine who's a marine biologist, he said that, there's pretty much scientific consensus that we can safely conclude that in 50 years, we're not going to recognize this place. We're going to be looking at an entirely different world. He said that's safe assumption to make.
I think I agree with that. That is a safe assumption. Yes.
Well, in my panicked pleb mode, I was like, well, is it going to be better? And he just goes, Ron, what do you want me to tell you? I don't know if it's going to be better or worse, man. I just know it's going to be different, and it's up to us to do the best we can. And I was like, well, that's fair. That's fair. I can't ask for anything more than that. Sparky says we should all speak to Bill Nye. He lives in my neighborhood.
He does.
Yeah, he lives in Pasadena. Too. Yeah. It's just a political football for the Dems. Yep, for everybody. Nays, what's up, buddy? Thank you so much for all your generosity today. I appreciate it so much, man. You help keep this show alive. APAB, I don't know what that means. All plants are badass. Is that what that means? All plants are badass. That makes sense. I'll go with it. Plant gardens, people. Let me teach you. My only option's cement, buddy, or I would really take you up on that. I'd love to plant a garden, but I don't live in an area where that's really possible for me. Use ships rowed by former oil execs, says Sparky. That's funny. Politicians exchange climate change for COVID. I guess as far as I guess you can say, they kind of stopped talking about climate change. I can see that. Cheers. Diversity is the key to life. Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much for your generous super chat contribution. Brent has a question. Thoughts on PG&E and Australia's Hornsdale projects using Megapack lithium-ion technology taking coal plants offline?
Oh, wow. Great question. Yeah, so there's a lot of pushback about lithium storage because it's pretty intensive mining, and so that's just another way that we're replicating this colonial extractivist thing that we've been doing for such a long time. Um, I see it right now. I personally see it as the lesser of two evils, to use a phrase that's being bandied about a lot. Burning fossil fuels is just literally killing us right now. I don't see electric cars as a solution, because I think we need to be thinking in more radical terms of kind of like surviving on this planet instead of keeping things just the way they are with cars and airplanes and whatnot. So that kind of goes back to what I was saying before about thinking about flying less or maybe stopping flying. It's this sense that we have to recognize that we can't just keep living the way we've been living and using as much energy per day as we've been using, and kind of continuing this massive energy disparity on the planet. You can think about bank accounts, and the average person in the United States has a much bigger one than the average person in Bangladesh or Ethiopia. You can also think in terms of energy use, and the same thing, the average person in the United States using a huge, just 10, 20 times more energy than the average person in Bangladesh. So yeah, I think we do need some of that to kind of replace our fossil fuel electricity system. Renewables, wind and solar, it helps a lot to have some storage in that system. Otherwise, you need to build, like twice as much wind and solar and have this like huge connective, so that when it's cloudy one place, you've got sun from some other place. So it's super helpful to have some storage in there. But at the same time, I think we have to think about, as much as possible, making that whole energy system smaller.
So, Sparky, of all the planets I've been to, Earth is my favorite. Things are headed feudal without climate change. You totally butchered. Oh, wait, no, hold on. You totally botched my Bill Nye comment. Did I? Here, let me go back to it. They should speak like Bill Nye. They should speak like Bill Nye, a real scientist. I've never watched his show. How does he speak?
Well, he's a science guy.
Yeah.
It's funny. I have this argument sometimes about like, what does it mean to be a scientist? My feeling is you're a scientist if you're basically paid to write peer-reviewed research, which, as far as I know, he isn't. Not to be elitist about it, I have great respect for him. I think he had a viral video where he was just swearing left and right and saying the whole thing's burning, and he like had a globe and poured some gasoline on it and lit it on fire or something. So yeah, I think there's a place for that. I personally, as a science communicator, I try to walk kind of a fine line, because I want to communicate this gut level urgency. But if I just got up on my roof and started screaming at my neighbors, they probably call the cops on me, and the cops would come and tell me to shut up. And so it depends on my audience. And I'm always trying to push people to go further and to take this more seriously without having them think that I'm just crazy and ignore me altogether. So I think Bill Nye, with that viral video, he walked that line brilliantly. So
well, and there's something very powerful when it's just like, I'm a scientist and I'm saying if we don't do this, we're fucked.
Yeah.
There's no ambiguity there. There's nothing over anyone's head. It's just straight up, this is how it is. And guess what? If we don't have a planet, well, the planet's not going anywhere. We could. If we're not on this planet safely, inhabiting it safely, you're not going to have pearls to clutch.
That's right. So
act now so you can clutch your pearls later.
Yeah, we can be scientists, and we can do our research, and we can do our analyses and minimize the biases, and we can be aware of the biases that we do have. Then we can stop for the day, and we can say, now as a human and as a parent, I'm terrified of this, and if we don't do something, we're fucked. And I think that's perfectly okay. I think it's even admirable at this point.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Again, peterkalmus.net. That's KALMUS.net, just his name.net, to check out all of his stuff. Peter, thanks so much for being here. Sparky, thank you for the super chat contribution. Brent, thank you so much. Dan, thank you. Sparky again. Nays, thank you so much for your generosity, man. And thanks for the oil. I appreciate it so very much. And Thank you, everybody, for being here. Tomorrow, we are going to do an episode dedicated to the trial of Julian Assange. Taylor Hudak is a journalist who is out in London right now covering it by the hour. She's going to come on our show tomorrow. She made some time for this show, so she's going to come on the show tomorrow and basically give us a breakdown of everything that's happening. So that's happening tomorrow on the show. Same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. In the meantime, you know the drill. Lucy says meow. I say peace.